All right. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to this week's Creative Pathways Talk. I am your host, Joseph, and hope everyone is just having a good week so far. It's Wednesday, we're at the middle of the week, almost to the weekend, so just hang in there. Today's talk is going to be an amazing one. Today we have the one and only Andy Saldana. So just a little bit background about him. Andy is the executive director of the New York Tech Alliance, a nonprofit organization that runs the largest meetup group in the world, the New York Tech Meetup, with over 60,000 members and a mission to build a more sustainable, diverse, and equitable technology industry for all New Yorkers. The organization sits at the center of the New York tech ecosystem. He is also a co-founder of Queer Tech, a nonprofit based in Montreal focused on empowering, connecting, and increasing the visibility of the LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs and technologists. Most recently, Andy was named to Crain's New York Business 2020 Notable LGBTQ Leaders and Executives list, and in 2019 was named to the Tech Power 50 in New York's technology community by City and State, the leading media company covering government and politics in New York. He is a strong advocate for increased diversity, access, and all-around inclusion in tech. But above all, he enjoys cultivating connections and all of the conversations that have evolved. So, guys, please welcome me and please help me welcome our guest for today, Andy Saldana. Hello,
Hello.
Andy. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. So you're in New York right now, right?
I am. Yes, I sit in Brooklyn.
Perfect. So tell us a little bit. How's New York like at the moment? Is it bustling? Are there a lot of sounds in the distance?
Well, things are starting to open up a little bit more, and it's really great to see. I mean, things are starting to. People are getting vaccinated, and people are starting to go out. It's starting to warm up a little bit here, so that's really fantastic. And it's always a great time to be in New York during the springtime, just on the cusp of summer. Summer is fantastic in New York, so I'm looking forward to that.
That's nice. Growing up, I've always heard New York is the city that never sleeps. And amidst the pandemic, would you say that still rings true?
I mean, it definitely slept this year. It was very, very quiet, eerily quiet at some points, especially towards the beginning. It was a very odd place to be during that time, and very, different. But New Yorkers are resilient, and people did everything that they needed to do. They wore their masks, they stayed home, and we were able to get that curve flattened. And now we're looking at what the future holds. So how do we make sure that it stays one of the most amazing cities in the world?
That's awesome. And yeah, you're right. New York is one of the most amazing cities in the world. Thanks to you as well, right? You're based in New York, and you have this really big you have a really big presence in New York. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I moved to New York just about 10 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. But it's really, I was traveling here a little bit before for work, and then I made the move again about 10 years ago, and I was looking for a change in career. I ended up applying. My background, just so everybody knows, is event production and management. I spent a number of years managing trade shows, logistics for trade shows. I didn't even know it was a career that you could have, and I found it, and I fell in love with it. It's such an amazing, exhilarating field. You get to see everything built from the ground up, and it's just phenomenal. When you go on site to a convention center, it's completely empty. 2 days later, due to the work that you're doing, it's a whole mini city, and then you see it all torn down right after the event. So it's just quite exhilarating. So I was coming to New York quite often for trade shows, and then I met somebody and moved here a couple years later, and fell in love with the city itself. It was very different. I was living in San Francisco prior, and they're on opposite coasts, and New York is just such a large city, so it's much bigger than San Francisco. But when I moved here, I was looking for something new. I had been at my job for quite some time, and I was just looking for something different. And I landed at a nonprofit that was looking for an events director, and that nonprofit sat at the middle of the tech ecosystem. And I knew about tech, and I was, I'm pretty, savvy as technology comes, but I'm not a developer. I am not an engineer, and I am not an entrepreneur. I was not an entrepreneur at the time, and so I had no idea what this world of startups was, what the tech ecosystem meant, or anything like that. And through this job, I was starting to interact with all of these amazing startup companies, tech companies like Tumblr, Foursquare, Shutterstock, that all have their headquarters had their headquarters in New York City. And I was interacting with all of these amazing entrepreneurs, and from that, starting to make the connections of like what entrepreneurship meant, what building a startup entailed and meant, and then seeing how all of the different communities within New York City as a whole would impact the tech ecosystem. And so it just grew from there. And, I've been at this job for almost 8 years now, and it's been I've learned so much in my current role, and I've gotten to interact with such amazing people within the tech ecosystem, people I had never even thought I would be connected to, like founders of companies and engineers that are creating the products that we use every day. And it's just phenomenal to see how all of that is part of a huge ecosystem in New York. And tech is just one industry in New York, and so you also, when you're here, you see the art community, the fashion community, the advertising, marketing, finance. They're all here. All of those world industries have headquarters here in New York City. So you feel that energy living here. You feel that energy working here. And it's just been such a transformational experience living and working in New York.
That's so beautiful how you're able to intertwine everything, even like from the most little aspects of either like, New York and the little different facets, right? And tie it all together to, create something bigger. But where did you start? It sounds like the way you described it sounds really magical and just like, oh my, like it's a world of its own. But how did you even like get into that? How did you even, your origin story?
Yeah, so where I started, I grew up in Texas, actually. I grew up in Houston, Texas. I went to high school in Houston at Eisenhower High School in Houston. And then when I graduated, I moved to Austin to go to the University of Texas in Austin. And I did my undergrad at University of Texas. I was able to finish that undergrad degree in 4 years miraculously. There's a whole journey of like taking a couple of semesters off and trying to figure out what direction I wanted to go. And I still managed to graduate in 4 years. And it was an interesting time to be in Austin. It was a long time ago. I'm quite, it's hard to say, but I'm quite middle-aged, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was 20 years ago. But it was I graduated in 2001, right before 9/11 happened. And so I had all of these plans. I had this idea that I wanted to move to San Francisco. I had this idea that maybe New York was where I wanted to go. And I had gotten an internship in San Francisco after graduating college. And everything was moving in that direction. But then due to family issues and 9/11 happening, that internship disappeared just like that, boom. And so I had to readjust and shift. And so I stayed in Austin for a few years, and it was a really great time to be in Austin. It was fantastic. I mean, I love Austin. It was still a small town, and I was, young and I had a job. So thank goodness I took a job as a teller at JP Morgan Chase, and it allowed me to just live my life. And it was really fantastic time in Austin. We spent a lot of time going to a lot of live music shows and just enjoying the city itself. I spent a lot of time downtown and just really being young in Austin. It was great. And then a few years later, I finally made it to San Francisco. I came out when I was about 21. And I just, I always had this dream of moving to San Francisco. San Francisco is the capital of queerness in the US. And I was just like, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. And so I finally just decided on a whim. I was like, you know what? I went to go see a friend on vacation. I loved it. I fell in love with it. I found an apartment. And then less than 3 months later, I moved with 2 bags, 2 suitcases, and just started my life in San Francisco. And I have to tell you, it was one of the biggest decisions I ever made, but I'm so happy I made it. I knew one person in the Bay Area, and it was quite scary to go there during that time. No job, very little money, and I still managed to make it happen. And I stayed there for 7 years, and I really loved San Francisco. It's such a beautiful city. The nature is just gorgeous. I had never seen the West Coast, and just seeing like the waves crash on the beach in the way that it does in California, I was just like, where am I? This is insane. So it was a really, really fantastic. And that's kind of like the journey from Texas, college, San Francisco, and then finally New York.
That's really cool. It sounds like it really does sound like a big adventure. Whenever you were in college, though, you mentioned on how you took a few semesters off to kind of find that direction. Do you mind going into more detail with that? Because I know there's a lot of us who are experiencing somewhat of that same experience, right? And we don't know what direction we want to go to. We're kind of on the edge, not really sure. What was your story with that?
Yeah, so it was so I graduated high school. I did really well in high school, and I really never tried. I did well without trying, which is not the best way to learn. So when I graduated high school, I had all of these options, and my desire was to go to NYU. I really wanted to go to NYU. I got accepted. I got accepted at Berkeley and Ithaca in upstate New York, and I just had my heart set on it. And when you're just getting into that phase, you don't realize how expensive college is going to be. You don't realize what kind of cost comes with that. And so after looking at everything, realizing that it just was not going to happen due to finances, I decided to go ahead and go to University of Texas, which is great. My sister spent a couple of semesters at University of Texas. Growing up in Texas, everybody is just like, yay, UT. So I'd always been a fan, but it wasn't my first choice. But I went to University of Texas, and I had a really rough time adjusting. I didn't live on campus. I was a commuter student. I had to ride the bus to and from school. It was just a lot of new things happening during that first semester, and I did horribly. I overstacked my schedule. I took, calculus 3 and chemistry for chemistry majors, and philosophy and child psychology. I took all these classes because I thought I knew how to learn. And it just set me up for failure. I did absolutely horrible. So after my first semester, I decided to take some time. I made it through my second semester. I did much better. I went through that adjustment period, but then I decided to move back to Houston. So I moved back to Houston for a semester. I was lucky enough to get back into U of H. I went to U of H for 6 months, and I realized that I just was not happy. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what direction I wanted to go. And I was working pretty much full time starting after that. And so I was like, man, I really feel like I'm accomplishing something in my work, even though I wasn't, but it felt like I was being productive. And so I decided to take some time off from school, and I ended up moving back to to Austin right after that, because I really loved Austin. And I worked for about 6 more months, and I took some more time off. And after about a year or so, I decided, okay, it's time to finish this degree. My parents were on me about just finish your degree. And I had switched from pre-med to psychology because I had resonated much more with the psychology classes. And I'm just understanding this at the age of 42, that I'm so grateful that I had such a supportive family to push me through, and a kind of a demanding family. Like my dad was like, I don't care what you do. It's fine that you're majoring in psychology, but you're gonna get your business minor. Like, and University of Texas at the time had a certificate degree called fundamentals of business, and it was great because it was a crash course in every aspect of business. And so I was like, fine, I will do the fundamentals of business certificate, and I will graduate with my psychology degree, and I'm going to be a social worker, so it doesn't matter about the business. I'm going to help people, and it just made it through the experience, and it was just really interesting because I had no idea what I really wanted to do, but you just move forward, right? Like I kept moving forward, and I am thankful that I did finish. I am thankful that I have a degree in psychology. I am thankful that I got that business certificate degree, because it just helped ease some of the roadblocks down the road.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, okay, I have a lot of questions now. First off, what you said really resonated with me because I'm also a commuter student. I take the bus. Oh, whenever school was in person, I would take the bus. I would sometimes get home around 11 at night just because, college life is tough. And the bus, thank goodness they run late, but taking the bus at 11 at night does a toll on you. So yeah. I know the struggle when it comes to that. But you have a degree in psychology, correct? And then with the business fundamentals as well. How did you become the executive director of the New York Tech Alliance? How does it segue into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always wanted to help people, right? Like my whole goal was to help people, whether it was through medicine or through social work or through, with the psychology degree. My goal was to help people. And like I said, I graduated in 2001, and it just was not a good time to graduate from college. It was rough. It's kind of similar to graduating now, right? Like there's just few jobs. The world kind of just stopped for a while, and we were all trying to figure out the pieces. So I just took a job. I just took any job I could find. I ended up as a teller at a bank. And like I said, it gave me enough security to continue living my life. And then I moved to San Francisco and really was lost. I, got there with no jobs. I worked at FedEx Kinko's for the first couple of months, just making minimum wage. And then I got a job at a bank, and that was great. And through one of my customers that I met at the bank, I got a job at a nonprofit that was a national office for a nonprofit that was headquartered in San Francisco. And that really started opening up doors for me. It taught me a lot about fundraising and development, what it takes to do the operations for a nonprofit, processing donations, processing acknowledgement letters. There's a whole business management system that you have to manage in order to run a nonprofit. So I was learning the back end of that. And then after a couple of years, I landed into that event management logistics position that I talked about, doing large trade shows and events, because I wanted a little bit different career. And I was, I get bored really easy. So I'm always looking for things that excite me and keep me learning. And so I learned this entire new industry about events and what it takes to do events. And when I talk about events, I'm talking about like 10,000 plus conferences, like South by Southwest style event conferences. I didn't work on anything that large, thankfully, but I worked on conferences that were about half that size. Multi-day events, you're building everything from scratch. You're responsible for managing the speakers and managing the technology and managing the exhibitors and the attendee flow, the attendee communication, all of those things that go into running an event. And it was really a valuable experience of learning that. It also allowed me to travel. So I would travel all around the United States doing these events in amazing cities like Boston and Chicago and Austin. And it was great to have that Vegas. I did a lot of shows in Vegas, and it's just really fantastic, especially when I was that age. I was really enjoying that travel. I even got to go to Abu Dhabi in the UAE on an event, and that was, life-changing. It was my first trip outside of the US, and I was just like, what is this? It's completely different culture, and I'm working in that culture, and it just taught me a lot. So from all of that, when I landed in New York, I had this amazing skill set of nonprofit management, donation management, event logistics and operations management. And I landed at the New York Tech Meetup as their events director. And the next piece was learning entrepreneurships and, supporting the startup ecosystem. And so over the years, I've gained all of that experience, and it's just helped me end up where I ended up as the executive director, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a very small nonprofit, so I only manage a few people, but the interactions are phenomenal.
That sounds like one heck of a journey. And when you got me at UAE and Abu Dhabi, because like I have family that lives there, and it seems like its own enchanted little part of the world. But obviously, it's pretty attainable. And did you expect to go all these places whenever you traveled, or was it just like, hey, come to this city this week or come to this city? How was that like?
Yeah, I would. Luckily, with the company I was at, we had to bid, or we had to, be asked to be on a show. And so I would definitely try to be on shows that were taking us to different places. And it was really quite interesting. And when you do good work, people recognize that and they want you to be a part of their team. And so I was getting requested to be parts of certain teams. And I just got lucky enough to be on that property and just get asked to do that. It was one of the last shows that I did with that company, but it was really exciting and a great adventure. And it just, it really opened my eyes up to what the world is. And, it's led me to go into Montreal and, meeting my co-founder for Queer Tech and just making that connection. And now I'm, I never thought I would be a co-founder of a nonprofit organization. And it's just really interesting, the connections that I made in my life have made what I do now very possible. And I can't stress that enough. It's all about the connections that you make in your life, the people that you know in your life, and how you leverage your network to support you in what you do.
Well said. Is Queer Tech part of New York Tech Alliance? Are there any correlations with that, or is it completely different?
It's a completely different and separate organization, but it's very similar in scope and sphere. And so I started a meetup group here in New York called Queer Tech, and I was running just monthly events for them, or quarterly events actually, in my spare time. And from that, I had grown a community of about 2,500 people in New York City that were engaged. And I went to a conference in Montreal, and while I was at a tech conference in Montreal, I met my co-founder, now Fel, and he was at the conference, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, you're queer, and I think we're the only two in this space. We're gonna be best friends." And I was like, "Oh, sure." And sure enough, we hit it off, and we became really fast friends. And he was like, "I want to start something like what you started in New York, in Montreal. How do I do it?" And so I provided this toolkit to him to start the meetup group in Montreal, Queer Tech in Montreal. And he is a talker and a connector and a master networker. And so he quickly grew that meetup group into a really solid group of individuals that were looking to connect within the tech industry, creating that safe space for queer people to connect in the industry, and was producing these really amazing events. And so 2 years after that, he was like, I don't know what to do. These companies want to give us money, but I don't know how to take it. And so I helped him incorporate in Montreal, and he asked me, "Do you want to be my co-founder?" And I said, "Sure, no, let's see where this goes." And that was in 2018, and we are growing really quickly. We just, COVID really did impact the nonprofit space overall, but it was a year that we were set to really grow, and so we just had to readjust, convert to virtual events and experiences, and we did that quite well. And then this year, we did a national Canadian job fair just a few weeks ago, and it was just super successful. So we're seeing that engagement and growth, and I think that combined with the timing of the social justice movement and people talking about things like diversity and equity and inclusion everything is coming together. It's timing is everything, and we're at this point where I'm seeing the growth starting to happen for the organization. And so it feels really good to be connected there, to be managing it, to help to have my hands in it grow, to help it grow and see how it comes out at the end. And it's, through my experience at New York Tech Meetup and New York Tech Alliance, I learned about entrepreneurship. I started dabbling in entrepreneurship and what it meant to be a founder, what it means to create a company from nothing. And it really has given me some great basic tools to help, to just help start that meetup group and then grow that meetup group into an actual organization. And we're still at the very, very beginning of what that looks like. So it's just really, I'm excited to see where we go with it.
Nice. So for the meetup and then for Queer Tech, what does your day look like? If, let's say, when you're doing work related to Queer Tech, what do your daily tasks include? What are your duties? Give us an insight to how operations go.
Yeah, so my day is split between the two organizations. The majority of it is focused on New York Tech Alliance because that is paying my salary and I need to give it 100%, and then I have to give another 100% to Queer Tech because that's my organization. So I'm basically working 2 full-time jobs at any given time. My day really starts by waking up. I try to allocate myself about an hour of time to just digest the day. So my routine is either it depends on how stressful the week is, but I either watch something really silly on TV or I wake up and I turn on all my podcasts and I listen through a series of podcasts every morning, just to hear what's going on in the world, what news is happening. I listen to a couple of tech podcasts that keep me up to date in what's happening in the tech industry. And then I, make my coffee, get ready to get to work. Then I sit down at my desk and it's nonstop. It's emails, it's organizing events, it's, emailing potential demoers and speakers, it's connecting with potential partners and fundraisers, it's having meetings with local government officials or local advocacy people who are trying to make the New York tech ecosystem better, that are trying to make the tech ecosystem overall more equitable. And it's basically ping-ponging back and forth between the two organizations and really trying to galvanize that community that we're building in both situations to be successful and to provide the services that our members are asking for. They're always asking for introductions to resources or introduction to certain companies or, looking for guidance. So I spend a portion of my week providing free office hours to early stage entrepreneurs. I provide office hours to other community organizers and community members to provide guidance and feedback. So it's just constant communication. I'm on Zoom calls all the time.
So you're working with a little bit of everyone, huh? You have the tech startups, you have the individual entrepreneurs, but you also have, like you said, the government officials, and then you have a lot of the I'm not too familiar with the terminology, but the people that help the donors. I think that's yeah. So you're really, like you said, involved with everyone. And does it feel stressful at times? Are you kind of like in the center of all of that, or are you kind of like, all right, you guys need me here, you guys need me here? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it is super stressful a lot of the time. Both organizations are very small. For New York Tech, we're about 3 employees, and for Queer Tech, we're 0 employees. So it's all volunteers.
Wow.
And it's really, between Nelfel and I, for Queer Tech, it's up to us. If things need to happen, it's up to us to make them happen. For New York Tech Alliance, I'm the one directing and managing how everything happens. Luckily, I have an amazing support staff to help make things happen. I also have an amazing board of directors at New York Tech Alliance that help facilitate a lot of the work as well. And they're all really engaged within the community. We all have this mission of making the New York tech community the best in the world. And so it's really great to have those interactions and to see. But yes, it does get stressful, and I am in the middle of it all the time.
And okay, so I know this may be a little too far-fetched, but since you guys are starting out in New York, do you guys have plans to expand the New York Tech Alliance to something more maybe across New York State or like even across the US or across the world? Is that in sight or is that too far ahead?
No, New York. The magic of New York Tech Alliance is that it's been focused throughout its entire origin on the city of New York, and so we really tend to maintain that focus. The great thing about being in New York is that we interact with the entire world. We interact with startup and founders from all over the world, from Germany, from Africa, from Israel, from Eastern Europe. We're constantly interacting with these founders because they want to come to New York as one of their markets. And so I get to interact with companies from all over the world, the West Coast, all over the country, you name it. I've interacted with companies from that place. But the work that we are really focused on is making sure that New York City as a tech ecosystem is solid. And so we don't have any plans to expand our reach. What we do, the group started as a meetup group in 2004 by the founder of Meetup. And so, Scott Heiferman started the Meetup group, and that's what grew into this organization. And because of that, the style of event that we did at the New York Tech Meetup did take hold, and it spawned very similar meetup groups around the country. And so, 2008 to 2013. I joined the organization in 2013, but you started to see these other meetup groups that were mimicking the New York Tech Meetup all across the country. And they really, what makes New York Tech Meetup event special is that we really focus on the technology. We don't focus on business model. We don't focus on total achievable market size. I get to ask those questions when I'm interviewing the founder, but when we're actually doing the event, it's really about how the technology works and what the impact of the technology is having. And so we started to see those tech groups pop up around the country, and it's been great to see that, to collaborate with them, but we have always maintained a focus on New York.
Oh, okay, beautiful. So keeping it true to its roots, keeping it as authentic as it can be. That's nice. So whenever you do work with these tech groups, do you get to work with, who do you work with exactly? Do you work with everyone in the group, everyone, like all the roles, or do the group send like a specific person to kind of represent them?
Generally, I'm working with really early stage startup companies, so I'm interacting with their founding team. Definitely the CEO, their CIO, CTO, their lead developer. Those are generally the interactions that I have from the startup side of things. From the thought leadership side of things, from like the companies that support the organization, I'm working with the business partners that are focused on that part of their market. And then as far as community organizers are concerned, I'm working with people from all over. So they're either an executive director of another nonprofit, they've started a meetup group, they are an advocate within the ecosystem working around accessibility rights or BIPOC integration into technology, into the tech ecosystem. And so it's really great because I'm working with all types of people, but it's everybody from the CEO down to the person who is actually doing the operational work and the communications and marketing.
That's cool. So have you been able to learn a little bit from each of the roles and kind of apply it to your knowledge as well, and kind of just have another learning experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always learning. It's something else that I try to let people know, that people are successful not because of where they started or what they're doing. And their people are successful because they always continue to learn, and you have to continue to learn, especially in the tech industry. Things change so quickly and so fast that you have to continue to take in information, understand how it works, and then how you're going to implement it for your project or your organization. I am not native social media person, and I've had to really learn and understand social media content, creating good content versus bad there's all these things that I'm still learning, and I have to say I struggle. I Not being a social media native, it's really hard for me to put those stories together to then promote the things that we're doing, and I understand what a value that is, but it's one of the biggest things that I struggle with.
So it was a big learning curve, huh? You really, but I mean, that's cool though, because it's kind of pushing your waters in a little, or testing the waters a little bit, and like really pushing you outside your comfort zone. And would you say now that you're more comfortable with it, with social media?
I surround myself with the people that are comfortable with it. I'll tell you that much. I really recognize that I am not strong in that area, and so I make sure that people on the team are strong in that area and are able to make that happen for me and for the organization. And so that's really something that I've learned as well. Like, if you're not good at something, make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the experts that are good in that area, so that the success of the overall organization is there. One thing I do say, I have to say, is that when we moved to the virtual events, and my background again is event production, so when I'm doing a live event, I can see everything happening in my head before it happens. And when we moved to virtual, it was one of the things that I'm loving the most is the creative parts that you get to do for a virtual event. We use StreamYard quite often for our virtual events, and just adding lower thirds or adding overlays and creating those overlays and what looks good, and it's just a lot of fun. It allows me it takes me out of my management of everybody, everything, and allows me to feel like I'm being productive in one area of the business that's also flexing a little bit of creative muscle. And I didn't realize how much I would enjoy that, and I'm finding myself really, really enjoying it.
And I remember this from our pre-interview. I really love that concept you put it in, flexing your creative muscles, right? So I remember from the beginning you were telling me that you wouldn't really call yourself a creative. Is that correct? It's not. Okay, so how about for other people who are in that position, right? Their creativity, I mean, everyone is creative, believe it or not, right? Everyone has that creative capability. But for those that are just starting to tap into their creative side, right? What advice do you have for them?
So, I mean, explore it. I am a fan of definitely getting in touch with what makes you happy, and being it during this time, during the pandemic, it's giving us some time to be in our homes and with ourselves in a way that I don't think a lot of us have had in the past. And so I know that I've been doodling a lot more and sketching and just drawing and just experimenting with things that I used to love as a kid and things that I used to love, when I was younger. And I realized how much it's making me happy to then translate some of that creative energy into the work that I'm doing every day. And when I get super, super stressed, my favorite thing to do is to create social media assets and creative for Queer Tech or for New York Tech Alliance. And it's really, I'm not very good at it. I'm not the master of it, but it's fun to just put different graphics together and then see how the world responds. And I have to say that, explore that as much as possible and explore what makes you happy. And then if you are a creative, it's such an increasing commodity, and people need that creative content for their businesses. They need that amazing storytelling. They need the amazing art that's coming into the world to support their brands, to support the organizations, to make an impact as an entrepreneur. And so it's really, it's all super, super important to the story that you're trying to tell.
Beautifully well said. I think that really gives inspiration to those who are, especially, I mean, to everyone, right? Since we are still in the middle of the pandemic. I know there was a comment that was saying the pandemic has allowed life to slow down. Definitely a good opportunity for creative pursuits. And that's 100% true. I mean, you took time to doodle and now you're making social media posts with graphics. I mean, that's amazing in it of its own. And so I feel like it really serves as an inspiration to all of us, really, that just tap into that creative side and flex those creative muscles. And, you'll start producing stuff that you may have never thought you could.
Yeah, and there's so many tools out there that make it easy for people who are non-creatives to just experiment and play with. And I think the world of content creation is democratizing who gets to be called a creative or who gets to dabble in those different areas. And it's really quite interesting to see how that's changing access to a lot of these things.
Definitely. I did have one question. I'm trying to see if there's any questions from the audience. Whoever's there, feel free to ask Andy questions. This is a really fun talk, and I'm learning a lot personally. So if you have questions, fire away. But the one that's been on my mind recently is that you've been talking. This overall arching theme I've kind of gathered is the tech ecosystem in New York. That's kind of like a big part of your identity, right? A big part of the identity you're helping shape and create. How can you compare the tech ecosystem in New York from when you first entered the industry, or even prior when you entered the industry? So where you are right now, how has it grown? How has it changed? How is it the evolution process of it?
Yeah, absolutely. When I moved to New York, there was definitely a tech industry here, very strong. New York has a very long history of tech. All the way to back to Bell Labs and beyond. They call it Silicon Alley. And when I first started with the organization, the main goal of the organization was to really promote tech in New York, trying to bring business here, trying to get people to create tech here, trying to create talent here, and start educating New Yorkers on what the tech industry was. And they were competing with San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley was the hub. It was where everything was. And New York was the center of almost every other industry. And so they were trying to get a really solid tech industry built here in New York. And there were so many amazing players that were trying to make that happen. Scott Heffernan from Meetup was a big one of the first really amazing founders, not first, but really amazing founders during that time to really culminate that sense of community and bringing people together. You had companies being founded like Tumblr and Foursquare that were starting to get noticed and build that momentum of the tech industry here. And then you fast forward to 2013, 2014. That's about when I started with New York Tech Meetup, and it was just blossoming. The ecosystem was happening. WeWork had opened up an office and a couple of offices in New York, and people were starting to understand what co-working meant and what entrepreneurship really was about, and the startup ecosystem was really thriving here in New York. All of these amazing co-working spaces, not just WeWork, were opening up, and there was this real sense of community taking hold around tech in New York City. And it really has just blossomed into this amazing industry within New York City. And it's cutting across every single industry, whether it's media, advertising, fashion, food, even, and marketing. Every industry has some, tech is influencing every industry in some aspect. And the city has really owned that and really encouraged that. And so the city has done amazing things to encourage people to move their businesses here, to support the employees of tech companies here, to really educate the population in New York City about potential opportunities and jobs in New York City. And we're seeing the goal is to close that digital divide, and how, now we're really focusing on how do we create more access and more training and more education at earlier ages, so that people are interested in tech, that are moving into careers in tech, that they're moving forward in their careers in tech, staying focused on tech, and just really supporting the overall ecosystem and making sure that there's opportunity for every single New Yorker in tech. And that goes beyond just New York as a whole. I think the tech industry is really changing the way the world functions, the way the world interacts with each other, and we need to make sure that we're educated about what the tech industry is, how it's impacting local communities, what local communities can do to make sure that they're educated to take advantage of the opportunities that exist in tech, and then make sure that those of us that have opportunities to have conversations are really making sure that the most vulnerable populations have the same access and opportunities, and have their voices heard. And I really feel strongly about that. And it's really, it's how do you advocate for the tech industry while also advocating for the most vulnerable populations? But then you see these amazing technologies come out that help support both sides of things. And then you meet communities that are really engaged and focused on helping those most vulnerable populations through technology. So you just see, when you take a step up and you see this amazing ecosystem of companies that exist, they're not all Uber, they're not all trying to grow and build and be the biggest thing ever. Some of them are really focused on one key mission and really growing that business to be part of a community.
I really liked how you dubbed it Silicon Alley. That was it had me in my, like, I was laughing, not in like good in a good way.
Well, but, that's not you doing. That's been around for some time.
I've never heard of it. I've only heard Silicon Valley, but Silicon Alley, that was new, and I really like it. But the reason why I say that is just because I really love how now that it's coming back to me, I really like how you're wanting to keep New York Tech, the Tech Alliance, is centered into New York City. Just because I can really see now how you guys are retaining the identity of New York through that. Whenever you mentioned about how all these tech companies, they have, a broader purpose, a broader mission, and they want to focus on building community within New York City. And, I can just really see the presence of New York in the New York Tech and just your story, really. And so I really love how you're choosing to focus on staying within New York, because I think that really does send a powerful message.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then, yes, so we have a bunch of questions that came up, so we'll go ahead and go down the line. The first one is, do you currently have a mentor? What advice do you have for those looking for a mentor?
Yes, I have a lot of mentors. I surround myself with really intelligent people, and everybody can learn something from somebody. So whether it's again, other community organizers that I'm working with, or the board members that that are serving on my board, or founders that are in the ecosystem that I'm interacting with, or company leaders, executives within companies, I always try to glean something from those experiences. I've had a number of mentors throughout my journey, and they've taken the form from friends that are in my personal network, to bosses that the previous executive director, the two previous executive directors to me in New York Tech, I consider mentors. They really showed me and taught me a lot around what it takes to run an organization. And then I continue to find new mentors as I grow Queer Tech and New York Tech Alliance.
Nice.
Quickly, for advice when you're looking for a mentor, it's just, don't be afraid to ask questions. And it's really, you don't know where those relationships are going to develop, and you won't know until you ask. So find somebody that you're comfortable with, find somebody that you're going to learn something with, and somebody that challenges you.
Beautiful. Next question. What advice do you have for someone who wants to move to New York?
Just do it. It's a very, I would say that you just need to be prepared to work really hard. the city really makes you work no matter what you're doing, whether it's art, whether it's fashion, whether it's, advertising, marketing, tech, you will work for everything. And the city is beautiful and joyous and it celebrates everything, but you work hard. I don't think I've ever worked as hard as I do now. And I think a part of that is having lived in New York. You compete for everything. I think I was telling you this in the pre-interview that, in normal times, I will say things have calmed down a little bit, but in normal times, walking to the subway, you're competing with space on the sidewalk. When you get on the subway, you're competing with for space in the subway. Like, you're just constantly surrounded by people, and there's some of the most amazing people in the world live here. So it's a challenge, and I would say that you just have to be tenacious and really want it to live in New York.
So that kind of segues into the next question, which asks, like, what advice would you give to someone who has that mindset, right? Who has that entrepreneurship mindset to kind of take up space and make an impact, but they don't necessarily want to start their own business?
Keep doing it. I mean, if you already are interested in entrepreneurship, learn all you can about it. There's nothing bad that learning about entrepreneurship is gonna teach you. It's only good things. It's only gonna add to how you think about business, how you think about the different things that you're doing in your career, different things that you're doing creatively, different things that you're doing on social media even. So the entrepreneurship mindset is I think key to navigating the future of the world. I really do. Like, we're all tasked to take ownership of certain things in our life, and that entrepreneurship mindset only is going to help you succeed in taking that ownership and seeing it through and accomplishing what you're looking to accomplish. And one of the key things about entrepreneurship is that you learn from failure. Like, you're gonna fail, you're gonna try things, they're not gonna work, and how you learn from it is what makes you successful. And I think that all of those fundamentals really teach you about how to be who you are, right? Like, you're not always going to get everything right, so just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get going.
So, looking at it from another perspective, right? Could you say that in addition for entrepreneurship serving as a purpose of learning about business, could it be sort of like a guidebook towards growth?
Absolutely. I think it's something that should be taught in all levels of education. I think learning how to think like an entrepreneur is really key to just, accomplishing what you need to accomplish. It really it teaches you tenacity. It teaches you how to shift perspective, how to shift what you're doing to accomplish what you need to do. And it allows you to recognize entrepreneurship in the world where you didn't see it before. I'm gonna give a shout out to the family and Cynthia, and one of my aunts made tamales her entire life and sold tamales out of her house, and she she loved her life. She made tamales, she sold them, everybody knew her, and everybody always ordered from her, and she enjoyed her life. And I didn't realize what an amazing entrepreneur she was until I started learning all of these terms and all these skills. And I was like, oh, my aunt did that. Oh, my aunt did that. Oh, my aunt did that. She had a whole network. She had a whole advertising built-in viral network that word of mouth that sold her tamales all over Houston. And it's just, when you recognize what you're being taught and you can recognize it in other people and just surrounding you, you realize that there's so many amazing entrepreneurs in every community that are making things happen for them and their families.
Amazing. Beautiful. Beautiful. What do you call that? Sorry, what you said, like, after that you mentioned tamales, I'm really hungry. So I was like daydreaming. I was daydreaming about tamales. Sorry, I had to bring myself back to reality. One of the other questions was, having lived in one place for most of your life, how do you figure out which city is your home and where you want to work?
It's all changes so quickly. I'm looking for the next city to call my home. I think maybe Montreal is going to be it. I love New York. I love San Francisco. I love Austin. I love Houston. They're all really phenomenal. They were great for that time of my life. But sometimes it's you need to shake things up. And I didn't realize how much I needed that in my life, but I really do. This is the longest I've ever lived in one place, and I have so much love for New York. But I'm already starting to think, well, what's next? What's the next move? And I think Montreal might be it.
Send us a postcard, please.
Definitely.
Let us know. And the last question is, I know you said you were a company of 3 for New York Tech Alliance, but are you guys looking to expand that?
Oh, we always are. We're always looking to grow and expand. Again, like I said, this year was very difficult for nonprofits, and so we had to contract a lot of our programs and our due to funding. And so we're just trying to get back on track, trying to do a lot of fundraising, working with local companies to try to get that support, working with our members to get that support there, and just trying to always keep growing. We are looking to hire a couple of interns this summer, so I'm really excited for that. And it's always great because, an organization of our size doesn't always need a whole team, but it really does help for certain times of the year.
Beautiful. And I think that's all the questions. So anything you wanted to end off with? Any final words you wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a journey just getting to where I'm at, and I've learned so much from so many different people. And it's just, I feel very honored and privileged to just be in the space that I'm at, to do the work that I do, to interact with the people that I get to interact with. And I to anybody out there who's asking like how, or, is it possible? I never thought I would leave Houston. I never thought I would go beyond the borders of Texas. And just saying yes to a few opportunities has allowed me to see so much of the world. And it's just, it's given me that confidence. And I think, that confidence is always key. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you can make things happen. And then just take as much as you can and learn as much as you can from other people, and take it and then move forward.
What an amazing way to end this talk. Thank you once again, Andy, for joining us. And, just let us know, keep up with us. We really want to see where you end up. If you move to Montreal, let us know. I heard I heard Canada's big treat is beaver tails. I've tried it once. So if you ever get beaver tails, then let us know.
Okay, sounds good. And, please feel free to share my contact information. I'm always happy to connect. Like I said, I provide office hours, and I'm open to connect with anybody. So please feel free to share my email.
Perfect. Well, thank you once again, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Have a good one.